there, my name's Dawn. I was born on December the 6th, 1964, and this is going to be my childhood memories growing up from then and all through the 1970s. And disclaimer, it's the way I remember my life. Hello, I'm Dawn. I'm back here to give you the second instalment of my life growing up, my childhood memories. Although I was born in 1964, I will cover obviously mostly the 70s. Now again, I've made a few little notes, so I'll keep looking down referring to those so I can remember to talk about a lot of things. Now there's going to be a lot of school episodes, so this is really covering my first day of school. So a little bit of back information. I never went to nursery school or kindergarten or anything like that. So school was my very first time in that kind of environment. So it turned out all the children I started school with already had their friends because there was a nursery in the school complex, the infant school. In England, you go to infant school, then junior school. Now, infant and junior school are now called primary school. And then you go to senior school, which can also be called high school, and that's it. So my first year of infant school, I actually went to school when I was 4. I was still 4, and it depends on when you're born. It normally cycles so that some children actually start at 4, but most children start at age 5. So I kind of did a little bit extra. Maybe that's why I was top of my class. Now, although my older sister had gone to school, I don't know why, but my mum assumed we had to be able to do certain things already. And she taught me to write my name before I went to school. Now, when you went to school, you also had like a shoe bag, a drawstring bag, and you had to have a matching, so made of the same material. Some of you would call it a book bag now. It didn't have handles on to carry it, and you left it at school. But what you would do is, it was like a book bag but made of material, and you tied it to the back of your chair. So you had to be able to tie it yourself. The teacher wasn't going to go around and tie everyone's thing. So you had to really be able to learn to do, or know how to do, a knot and a bow. And so my mum taught me that before I went to school. And in future years, one of my jobs was an educator, and one of the things I did was worked at a nursery school with children about to go into school, and I had to do the transition of them into school, and I taught them those same things. Even though it's not a thing they have to do now, I still taught them to have a good attempt at writing their name. Obviously a longer name's harder to do, and to tie a knot and a bow and some other things besides. So that was something, and I made sure they all achieved that before they went to school. So I had a good concept because my mum also had at home it was kind of like a box set of flashcards, like words on big cards. And that was called I Am Me, Who Are You? And it was a little book, and the days I went to school, you learned by keep repeating words. So in a book you would have words that kept repeating, and this was things like I am me, who are you? You are who? Who are you? I am me. And that kind of concept. And then all those words and other words would be on really big flashcards. I don't know where my mother got it from, but that's how I learnt to read at home before I went to school. Well, when I went to school, I wasn't very happy leaving my mummy, because for me that was the first time I'd left my mum, and school must seem like a really long day. So I didn't really want to go. I didn't cry. As far as I remember, I didn't cry the first day, but I didn't want to leave my mummy. And my mum explained that I hadn't been to nursery school, so the teacher liked me. Remember, I have ringlets. I have natural ringlets. I tend to straighten my hair all the time, and luckily as it's got thicker and thicker, they've dropped out. But I had proper corkscrew ringlets, and I looked adorable. I'm sure a lot of people thought they were fake, but they weren't. And she took to me, she thought I was lovely, Mrs. Rye. And she was my best ever teacher. I think I kind of, with every teacher I had after that, I made a comparison to Mrs. Rye. No one was going to stand up to how nice Mrs. Rye was. And I started to call her my mummy at school. And she was embarrassed, but she loved it. So she took me under her wing, and she noticed that not only did I find my peg, which had my name on and a picture, I was helping some other children to find their pegs. Perhaps I've always wanted to be a teacher, but because I know sir and phonetics, I know his sounds. So they said what their name was, and I knew to look for the first letter. And she realised I was actually probably quite good. So she let me help out, because when it was let's sit down and learn flashcards, I knew them all. I kept putting my hand up. I knew them all. And I started to get bored at school. So she realised this was going to be a problem, and she brought me out the front to sit next to her, hold out the flashcards, pick them out of a box, show them round to everybody. And I had to say if they were right. If someone put their hand up, I had to point to them, and I had to say if they were right. I'm not sure the day I started school. I'm thinking it was a Thursday, because what I'm going to say now didn't happen for the first few days of school. So the first couple of days, I'm going to say it was probably a Thursday, because you would start just 1 or 2 days before weekend, so it's to get organised. And my mum, she was worried about leaving me because I didn't want her to go, but the mums were all allowed to stay for a little bit if they didn't have to go to work, and then they could go. And she let mum stay for a little bit, and then mum went. And my mum said because there was the infant school, which I was in, and the junior school was next door, another building, there was a fence between the two playgrounds, and you weren't allowed to sort of go to the other side. And she said to me, your big sister's in the junior school, go and meet her at the fence at playtime. So she knew I had someone kind of there. So it was all right. But the reason I think it's Thursday was I was all right for a few days. So I'm going to say Thursday and Friday. And then we had the weekend. And obviously I knew this from school because my big sister went to school. So I knew, like, you have the weekend. And then on Monday, I didn't want to go back. I told my mum I didn't want to go back because I already knew everything. I knew how to do it all. I knew how to do it all. And I'm going to put in a clip now of what I did on my first day of school. This is my very first school book from my very first day of school. So let's take a look inside. The very first page. And the thing at school was, the teacher said you had to try and trace your name, which I followed her instruction, but I could already write my name. So I always showed her, I don't need to trace it. I know how to write my name. And considering I was at school at the age of 4, that is pretty good. And I remember she used to say, what do you think starts with the letter A? And you had to think of something. She would write it down and then you would draw it and colour it in. Now, as you know, I do homesteading now. This has got some issues, a yellow apple. And again, yes, I'm showing her I can write my name, but you want me to trace it, I'll trace it, keep you happy. And here we have H. So I decided house, house. Look at my beautiful house. Needs a bit of work on the roof. And then we have letter U, umbrella. For some reason she didn't write that one. Perhaps she thought I would have my own way of doing that. And then, oh, we got maths now. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now the letter S. Oh, look, scissors. How sweet. Sun. Now, I do remember I have one of my favourite, most ever sundresses, and I will show you a picture of that, me wearing my sundress. I remember it was grey with a yellow and orange sunflower on, so I'll find a picture and show you that. And I'm assuming it's a sunbed. And sister. Sister, that's my sister, my big sister. Here we have the letter T. Teeth. Now, my mum always kept my baby teeth, which I still have. Do I need to keep them? Who knows? So I'll show you those if you want to see them. And towel. No, I'm even writing the words now, copying the words. Tortoise and table. There's the tortoise and there's the table. Now we're writing news. See the stage. Now this is because, as you know, I was at stage school already, and this was probably, we'd just done or was rehearsing on the stage for the first show in a proper theatre, not just a hall or something like that. It was in a really big proper theatre in Wimbledon. So there's me and my sister dancing on the stage. I was an icicle and she was a snowflake, so I'll show you a picture of that. And now we have more news. Look at the washing line. Look at the washing line. And I don't think we had to write the words, but look at me go. So here is the washing line. Now these are all the pegs, in case you can't tell. These are obviously all the pegs. And now I am Dawn. Oh look, perhaps that's my sundress, because I wouldn't want to paint it grey, colour it in grey. But look, it's definitely the sunflower one. Yes, I'm hairless. I've got no arms. Oh, isn't that sweet? I think it's lovely to have some drawings that you've done when you were tiny, your first drawings. Do any of you have those? Do let me know in the comments. Oh, one day. This is how we would start a story. One day. Do you remember that? You always had to start a story. Not once upon a time, but it was always one day. And then the books we read to learn to read was Janet and John. Janet and John books. So that was the books we had to read. Do any of you know those? And then look at Carol. Look at me writing my own sentences now. Look at Carol. Carol is my big sister, and she was not fat at all. She was not fat. That's sweet. She's got no hair either. Did I not like to draw hair? And I wanted to be a hairdresser. strange. And that's all we have. That's all we have in a part, as you can see. But I do also have the first thing, two things I remember doing on the first day. One was cutting out, and I'm still not brilliant at cutting out. So you could paint a background and cut out pictures from a wallpaper book. I remember the great big sample wallpaper book, and I wasn't good at cutting out, and I really wanted these pictures. So I asked the teacher, could she cut some out for me? And the teacher loved me to pieces, so she did. I just couldn't cope with the children's scissors. I think that's why I've never been good at cutting out. Using children's scissors put me right off from day one. The other thing I remember doing was you could play with clay and make something with clay. And I made my mummy's face because I was so missing my mummy that I wanted to make a face for her, because the teacher said you could take home what you made. So I wanted her to know I was thinking of her while I was at school. And I made my mummy's face. I don't have a picture of it, but my mum does still have it. And it's a big slab, a big lump of clay. And I remember digging in my finger to make the eyes, the nose and the mouth. That's all it consisted of. And my mum still has the clay face of her, of course, with no hair. So I said to my mum, I didn't want to go back. Well, mum was going to buy me a present for going to school, a big step. So she was going to get me something anyway, but she was worried I'd be like, all right, and then not all right, or not all right. So she didn't want to give me a present and then like I wouldn't then go to school. But I seem to recall she did come in, I'm going to guess for a week. She would have to clarify it because when you're a child, time seems different. But I think for about a week, because she didn't go to work, my mum, the teacher let her come and stay for, I don't know how long, a little while each morning. And mum enjoyed it. And she made sure she wasn't just with me. I just wanted her to be around. So I think she would go and talk to other children. She was trying to wean me off her being there. And I didn't mind that. And then she'd say, oh, I just need to go and do some shopping, or I'll be straight back. And she weaned me off. But to get me to go back to school, she said, I'm going to get you something, but you mustn't cry or not want to go to school again. And because I loved my doll's house, she said, well, I'll take you to the shop and you can choose any one thing for your doll's house. But she said, then I'm not coming into school anymore. So I was all right with that. I love my doll's house, and I'll share a link below this video of my doll's house, which I still have. So I'll share a link to that, and you'll also see the thing I'm talking about. So of all the things I could have chosen for my doll's house, you will never guess what I chose. It was a dustbin. Now, you might think that's a little bit of a strange thing to choose, but no, let me explain. I like things that do things. So in my opinion, I could play with that because I could take the lid off, and I had a little like bathroom towel, and I could put that in, and the food, when they'd finished their food, I could put that in, and then I got out the little dustpan and brush or the broom, and I'd like, oh, something's fallen on the floor, sweep it up and put it in the bin. So I like things that do things. And much later on in life, my parents started collecting charms for us to put on bracelets or necklaces. And I always said I wanted ones that did things. So whether the wheels went round or something moved on it. So I've always liked things that are useful or playable. So even today, I don't just like ornaments, I want something useful. Now, I've talked about the book that I used at home, but the school books we learnt to read with were Janet and John. And anyone about my age from England will know Janet and John books. And again, it was the era of repeating things. Look, John, look. Come, John, come. Janet and John come. These kind of things. That is how we learnt to read. Recognition. You could say there's some memory in it, but your part of your brain is seeing the words, and we learnt phonetic, so we would sound out rather than just saying it. We would actually sound it out and do that. So I remember we did quite a lot of reading at school, and I had a love for reading. But again, because I had a good concept of some basic words in these first books, I was storming through these Janet and John books. I believe there were 4 main ones, and then there was like a proper thick book afterwards with stories in. And I remember in that was the 3 Billy Goat Gruff. There was the one where the chicken thinks, is it the sun's going to fall on his head? Chicken Little. He thinks the sun's going to fall on his head, and he asks people to come and help him. Come and help me do this. And none of them will help him with the harvest. But then when he makes something from the harvest, from the corn or whatever it was, they all want to come and eat it, and he doesn't allow them. I remember that story. That's the only stories I remember from this book of stories. But as I say, I was rushing through them. I could just read the basic ones. I think Mum had those books at home as well, which was helpful. I'd already probably read at least the first one before I started school. And then, because I was going through them fast, I kept being given these little miniature books. Now, I can't remember what they were about or what they were called, but I remember they had kind of a blue thick striped pattern on them, and I think a red binding. They were only like little miniature books, and she would give me those, and I thought that was, why have I got to read these? It's almost, I've got to wait for the others to catch up. And I was almost on this big thick book, which I don't think you were supposed to be on in your very first time of your first class, your first year of school. So she'd give me them, and as quick as she'd give me them, as I say, they were very thin and very small, I'd go up to her and, on her desk, and she'd be, what's the matter, Dawn? Do you need help with the words? I went, no, I finished it. And she said, sit down next to me and read it to me. Whether she thought I didn't read it all. So I'm literally reading it all. And I am a fast reader now. I don't know how fast I was reading then. And I was like, yeah, I've read that. And then she would give me little jobs to do because it was still reading time. And there was quite a lot of these. I'm going to say maybe 20 or so of these books. There were a lot of them. And I'd got through those as well. I think she then let me choose a book or something from the bookshelf and go away and read another book, which is why I like libraries and choosing books maybe. So I remember that. The other lesson I really love, was, I know now, they're Venn diagrams. So it was a start of maths, if you like. And she had printed out single sheets of paper, and you went and got one of these single sheets. And if you don't know what a Venn diagram is, it's literally circles overlapping. So you'd start with 2 circles overlapping, and that was what was printed on the paper, quite a big sheet of paper. And so you all each had one of those. And then you got these little tins. I can see the tins in my head now. They were about that round, about that deep. I don't know if they bought the tins. They didn't have anything written on them, although there were some square tobacco tins because they had an orange print on the top, and one of my uncles smoked that tobacco. So I remember they were tobacco tins. Can you imagine now in schools children being allowed to have things inside tobacco tins? Anyway, inside you could go and pick any of them out. You picked 2. I think you picked 2 tins out, and you couldn't see what was in them, and you went back and sat down. And then you opened the tins, and in the tins were, if you know what Christmas crackers are, that you pull them, they got little token things in. Or sometimes some of you know, like these gumball type machines where you get a little toy out, like little miniature toys. Well, they were full of those. And there'd be one type in one and something else in another one, lots of them. and you had to put them in these circles. And if you know Venn diagrams, where they overlap, that means there's something in common with these things. So for example, if one had little dogs in and one had little men in, then you could put the dogs in one, the men in the other. But then you could think, what's a similar thing some of them have? Maybe some of them were pink. So you put any pink men and pink dogs in the overlapping bit. And I was doing that and doing that. In the end, she printed out some special sheets for me where you had 3 circles with different overlaps. So I remember that. I seem to remember doing that quite a lot, these Venn diagrams. What was the thing I hated most doing at school? Dressing up. Because my mum was very much one of these mothers who don't touch that, it's dirty, or you don't know where that's been, those kind of things. And I saw these old dressing up clothes and I was like, I don't know where that's been. And I refused to go in the dressing up corner. I don't think I ever told my mum that. But I remember I would never go in the dressing up corner, and that was in like a playhouse. There was a playhouse in the classroom, which eventually ended up outside, but that was in there. So they were my most liked and most not liked parts of school. This is only my first year. The other thing I want to talk about, Mrs. Rice, something I really remember, was you have school like jumble sales and fundraising and fetes and things like that to raise money. So you have different stalls set up in the school. And one time, I don't know what it was, a Christmas one or whatever, and your parents come and you come back to school, whether it's a Saturday or something like that, and you go back with your parents. And I was with my mum and we're looking round. They sell jams, or sometimes it's jumble, sometimes it's you buy raffle tickets, that kind of thing. And I went back with my mum, and Mrs. Rye had a stall. And she had this doll, quite a big doll, really nice doll. I was saying before, it wasn't quite china. It wasn't like a china doll, but if you dropped it, it would have smashed. So I'm not sure what it was made of. And she had this almost Victorian-y sort of outfit on. I talked about it in my last video, so go and look at that, the last episode. And Mrs. Rye's stall there was a printed out sheet of girls' names, and you had to pay however much it was to enter, and you put your name next to one of these names, and at the end they would reveal the doll's name, and whoever's name was next to it won the doll. And I can't remember what the names were. There was some quite bizarre old-fashioned names, I suppose, because it was supposed to be a Victorian doll. And I was just looking, and my mum was reading the names out to me, what the names were, because obviously I couldn't read all of those. And she's reading them out, and she said, you tell me what name you think would be the doll's name. And as she's reading it out, before she's barely started, one of the names was Virginia. And I don't like that name. Virginia. And before Mum's carried on going past the names, Mrs. Rye's like, oh, Dawn, that's a lovely name. Do you like that name for the doll? And I was like, no. And Mum's reading out a few more names, and Mrs. Rye's like, oh, I'm not allowed to play because it's my stall. But if I could play, I would choose Virginia. Mum looks at her, and then Mum carries on reading some more names. And Mrs. Rye said, would you like to play for me? You could put your name, and then if you win it, then you win the doll. You can keep the doll, but I'd like to guess it's Virginia. And Mum's realised at this point she's telling us to choose the name Virginia. So Mum's encouraging me as well. She said, oh, put Virginia, let's put your name there. And I wasn't really happy. I didn't say anything, but I was like, oh, but it's Mrs. Rye and Mummy. Mummy and Mrs. Rye want the name Virginia. So I was like, oh, okay then. So they put my name there. And guess what? at the end of the afternoon, they called out all the winners of the raffles and everything. And they said, and the doll stall, guess the name of the doll. The doll's name is Virginia, and the winner is Mrs. Rice. Smiling. She's smiling. And I kept that doll. I didn't like the doll. I didn't like the name. I did keep calling it Virginia. But as I said in my last episode, I'm not a doll person. I'm not really interested in dolls. And I did keep that doll just because of that until I left England to come and live in Cyprus. What I did like about the infant school was when you came out, there were great big huge wooden gates. They were always open, but I'm assuming when school was closed they were closed. Really tall gates. I think they were blue. And then when you came out, up the very end of the road up the top, which wasn't the way we walked home, there was always an ice cream van. Oh, ice cream van. But my mum very rarely allowed us to have that. It was a special treat, maybe the end of term we could go and get one. But she never allowed me to have what I always wanted, was the ice cream instead of the cone, because I wasn't keen on the ice cream cones. You could have the ice cream in like a triangular plastic cup, and she wouldn't let me have that because in the bottom was a ball of bubble gum, and I was not allowed bubble gum or chewing gum, so I never got what I wanted. So we had 99s, which are ice cream whippy. They go round out a machine in an ice cream cone with a chocolate flake, and they were called 99s. Something else I really remember was if it was your birthday, then you would go up on the little stage and you would get to wear just for the day a little badge with I am and the number, how old you was. And you had to take in a birthday card, only one, your favourite birthday card. And of course, everybody took the birthday card from Mummy and Daddy up because that was mostly a thing then, Mummy and Daddy. And I didn't do that because I had a friend. Now remember, all the girls were already friends with people. Boys just want to play. So my best friend was Philip, a boy. And I said to my mum, I'm going to take in the birthday card from Philip. And I still remember it to this day. It had a witch on a broomstick on. It was like cartoony. And I took that up on the stage and everyone was embarrassed that I said, this is my boyfriend. I meant a boy that was a friend. And this is my boyfriend gave me this birthday card. Now, the reason I had it in the morning assembly was because Mum always had our birthday parties on my actual birthday, whether it was a weekday or a weekend, and it happened to be a weekend, so I had the birthday card. And I used to play with Philip in the playground. He had a pair of handcuffs. This sounds a bit odd these days. And he said, will you let me play cops and robbers? And I would put you in the handcuffs. And I said, all right. So he always, every playtime, he would meet me in the playground and he would put the handcuffs on me. And he says, you have to stay with me now because only I know how to open them. And I just had to be with him all the playtime. And then the end of playtime, he always released me from the handcuffs. And then I had, his boyfriend was Robert. Robert was his best friend in class because you sat girls and boys separate really. And his friend was Robert. But he wouldn't play with Robert particularly at playtime. I think that maybe their parents knew each other, but they were friends in class because he'd always say, no, I'm playing with Dawn. I'm playing with Dawn. It's a game me and Dawn are playing. And then one birthday, Philip had, and he apparently had told his mother, I'm having Dawn to my party. I was like top of the list. So I was at Philip's party And I think his sister, he had a big sister, may have well been in my sister's class at school. Anyway, Robert had a birthday party and his mother didn't have a full party. It was have one friend round for tea. And apparently he had said he wanted me to come round for tea. And Robert's mum has said, no, you have to have Philip. So that's, I think their mothers must have been friends. No, you have Philip. Philip's your friend. And he said, I want Dawn. And it turned out that year his mother relented and had 2 round for tea. So he could have Dawn, but he also had Philip. And there is another boy that was in my very first class at school. And he also had, this boy was called Richard, and he also had a cousin in the same class at school who became a great friend of mine. And my nan, my grandma, knew the family of the boy who was called Richard. And Richard will feature in a later episode. He featured strongly in my 4th year trouble of infant school, and he features much further on in my lifetime. So we will jump to that and just tell you that Richard ended up being my first proper boyfriend. Sorry, Philip. So look out for episode 3. If you haven't seen episode 1, do go back and see that, and look out for what I'm going to talk to in my next episode. Thanks for watching, much appreciated, and don't forget to comment your memories below. See you next time.